Welcome back everyone to my Introduction to Watercolor class. In this video I'll do a demonstration of some basic watercolor techniques part 2. Today I will be demonstrating some additional basic techniques in watercolor, including layering. The concept of layering is crucial to understanding watercolor. We're going to take a look at the effects of layering colors over top of each other. Wet in wet, which gives very unpredictable but visually stunning effects. This technique is great for creating blurry or foggy effects of water or reflections. Dry in wet, which also gives very unpredictable but stunning effects. Both wet in wet and dry in wet are great techniques for creating fog, very atmospheric effects in the sky. And finally, dry brush. Dry brush is wonderful for creating the effect of texture on bark, ground, fabric, fur, grass, and countless other applications. Let's go over the materials we're going to need today in this lesson. We won't need a piece of wood to prop up our panel today because we're going to be working flat. We will need a board or panel to mount the watercolor paper to. We'll need a piece of watercolor paper. It's approximately 8 by 10, cold press, 90-pound watercolor paper. We'll need a round brush number 8, a watercolor paint set, a pencil, a water cup, masking tape, a sponge, and a paper towel. Let's get started. I'm lining my paper up with the board, and now I'm going to tape down the edges of my watercolor paper to the board. And remember from last time, this is to help keep the paper from buckling. I'm going to try to apply the tape so that half of it is on the paper and the other half is adhering to the watercolor board. And then I want to put a horizontal strip right through the center and a vertical strip of tape right through the center. That will divide my area into 4 boxes for the 4 different watercolor techniques that I'm going to demonstrate today. In the upper left box, the first technique I'm going to demonstrate today is layering. This involves layering bands of color, different colors across or over top of each other, but allowing the ones underneath a chance to dry. I'm going to begin with this technique and end with it, and we'll talk about its effects on color. I'm going to start with the color yellow. And remember, I want to have a puddle big enough that I'm sure I have enough paint to do the job. I'm just going to put a few diagonal strokes of yellow of varying sizes. I'll start in the upper left. These can be a little crooked. They don't have to be perfect. I'm going to stop at 3 different bands of color. Now I'm going to move on to the second technique that I'm going to demonstrate today, which is wet in wet. I'm going to be mixing several colors to use for this technique. I'll keep that puddle of yellow to include. I'm also going to create a puddle of orange and a puddle of violet. Again, make sure that you've got enough mixed that you're sure you're going to be able to finish the job in that area that you're painting in. With a wet in wet technique, the next step is we want to clean the brush out really well, and then I'm going to wet the entire surface of the paper. Later on, you'll see you can be selective as to which areas of the paper that you decide to pre-wet. Depending on the effect you want, there's a limit to how much water you want to put on the paper. Ideally, you should be able to look from the side in the glare of the light and see just a touch of texture still showing through that area of water. And you can also use that trick to make sure that you've got the entire area covered. Just kind of lean down and take a look at the paper from the side. Okay, I've got my paper covered with water. Now I'm going to randomly dot in and dab in strokes of varying color. I'll start with the yellow. Now I'm going to randomly dab in some orange. I don't need to cover this paper completely either. It's okay to leave a few little white areas. That paint will bleed together on its own and cover most of the area of the paper. Last, I'm going to work in a few strokes or dabs of purple or violet. By the way, for this technique you can use any color combination that you want to. I would suggest using at least 3, just so you can see how these colors blend and bleed together. I'm going to stop there and I'm going to allow that to dry. As it dries, it will naturally even out a little bit with the color. So we'll come back to that later and see what it looks like after it dries. Next is the all-important step of thoroughly cleaning off your paint palette. So I'm going to take my sponge and soak up the excess paint, and then finally dry it off and clean it completely with a paper towel so I can get ready for the next technique. The next technique is dry and wet. This one is very similar to wet and wet. The only difference really is the consistency of the paint that we mix to dab into that wet area of paper. I'm going to add water to the surface of the paper and make sure it's thoroughly covered. Remember, you can lean down, look at the paper from an angle to make sure that you've got it covered. This time I want to mix paints that are more dry, meaning more pigment mixed with the water. It's still going to be a liquid consistency, but it will be noticeably thicker than the way I've used paints up until now. I'm just going to add water to the surface of these watercolor cakes and paint directly from what I'm getting on top of the surface of those cakes of paint. I'll start with brown. And I'm just adding some little strokes and lines and allow that paint to bleed into the area of wet paper. I'll add some blue as well, again just random strokes, some dots and dabs, some linear effects. Just experiment with the various shapes and lines you're adding. I don't want to cover the paper completely. I want to allow some white space and areas for those colors to bleed. Now I'll dab in some orange. You can use any colors that you want to. The effects are really fun to watch. Last, I'm going to add just a few strokes of black, and this time I've got the paint even thicker on my brush. You can see that technique would be really cool for creating out of focus or foggy trees in the distance. And I like that. It's just an abstract little design. I'm going to let that dry and we'll come back to it later and see the results. Now in the bottom right corner, we're going to do a technique called dry brush. Dry brush is, as I said before, excellent for grass texture, for dirt, for rocks, for fur or fabric or tree bark. I'm going to start with brown paint, and I've added some water to this. It's kind of thinned out. I'm going to test it here on my test paper. Now what I want to do is put strokes on the surface of the paper quickly where I'm trying to just hit the top of the tooth on the texture of the paper to create a textured effect. I'm just using vertical strokes, and I'm going to start at the top with the lightest color. Now I'm going to add a little bit more pigment and make it a little darker and work my way down. Again, just applying these quick strokes where I'm trying to hit the very top of the tooth of the paper. And I'm going to add a bit more pigment and try to make it darker as it goes down toward the bottom. Maybe to sort of create a sense of depth. This time I'm going to add a little bit of black to the mixture to make it even darker. And it's really creating some nice texture toward the bottom. And even more black and drier paint right at the bottom. Let me fill in here a little bit. And I'll stop there. We'll take a close-up look at that toward the end of the video. And again, I want to clean everything out of my tray because I'm going to be mixing some new colors. I don't want that to mix in with the colors that I'm using. Now I'm going to finish up with that layering technique in the upper left. I've given that yellow a chance to dry. I think I'll start with red and create a puddle of that on my palette. And I think I might as well go with primary colors, so I'm going to make a puddle of blue that I'm going to add in there too. All I'm going to do is crisscross those strokes of yellow that I put down earlier with red first. And I'm just going to go diagonally from the upper left to the bottom right. I'll vary some of the thickness. I'll put a thin stroke in there too. You can try building some of these areas up a little darker or heavier, some a little more light, because the purpose of this is just so we can understand and see the effects of layering on color. And we'll discuss that here in a bit. I'm going to finally add some blue, a few different diagonal strokes in between those red areas of color. Again, I'm going to vary the thickness. I'll add some thin strokes. For this last one, I'll try to get a little darker and kind of a wider swath of color. So I let those bands or areas of color dry for layering. And I've decided I'm going to put one last series of lines across. I'm going to stick with red and blue, but I'm going to add a few strokes in between some of those yellow strokes that I put down first. I'll start with a really thin line of red. I'll add a blue line diagonally in here. And maybe I'll add some green in there too. Why not? Okay, I'm going to stop there, clean off my paint tray, and then I'm going to allow these techniques plenty of time to dry before I remove the tape. Now these have had a chance to dry probably 20 minutes. I'm going to carefully and very slowly peel the center pieces of tape away. First the vertical strip and then the horizontal strip. And I'm peeling it very low or close to the paper. Now I want to peel the tape away from the outer edges. Remember, I want to pull it very slowly and away from it at about a 90-degree angle. That way, if it would happen to tear the paper, it'll only tear the border. It won't tear into your image. I'm going to take my pencil and I'm going to write the name of each of these techniques right underneath of it. Now let's take a look at the results. The first technique and last technique I worked on was layering. Take a look at those intersections, those small areas where these bands of color crossed over each other. In those areas where they are overlapped, the color is either darker or more intense, or it's a mixture of all of those colors together. Next we have wet and wet. Really beautiful technique for creating clouds or reflections on water or other atmospheric effects. Then we did dry and wet. Again, like wet and wet, dry and wet is very unpredictable. However, the results are always really stunning. It's also good for atmospheric effects like fog. Those could be trees, they could be telephone poles that we're seeing through a misty atmosphere. And the last one we'll look at here is dry brush. Remember, I tried to layer it light to dark as it came from the top to bottom to sort of get a distance effect Toward the bottom, I really was able with that drier paint to just brush the top surface of the textured paper and create a really rough look that could mimic bark, stone, fur, fabric, or countless other textured surfaces. You'll see how these techniques that were demonstrated in this video and the previous one can be applied in many different ways. That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the demonstration, and I also hope you'll join me for the next lesson. Have a wonderful day.